systemically, as I drew my hand down, underneath this very thin skin, I saw a lattice work, honeycomb shaped, graphene in color, gray. And beneath that is something that I will never, ever forget for the rest of my life, as if I could forget any of this. There were plasma conduits. And I'm not talking wires, I'm not talking nuts, I'm not talking bolts, I'm not talking a serial bus system. I'm talking plasma conduit bands that looked like a neural network. I could see what looked like synapses firing, because in between these bands that streamed through this craft, underneath the skin, white lines that looked like, there's no other way to explain it, but thunderbolts.
So I want to go through this a little bit because I think that perspective right now, given what is breaking here in Washington and the laws that have been passed by the Congress, is very important. Next. So just a quick trip through here. The organization, the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence, I formed in 1990. It's 33 years ago. In 1991, the first supportive military officials contacted me. These were white hats who had been in unacknowledged special access projects, who knew what we were doing and that it was effective. And now I refer to the very controversial CE5 contact protocols. A year later, in 1992, we were with a group of 60 people on a beach near Pensacola, Florida, where we were able to vector in contact, and there were 4 extraterrestrial vehicles that appeared, one of which was photographed and appeared on the front page of the Pensacola paper. That then put what we were doing on the radar of the CIA, NSA, and the Pentagon. And there were 60 people there, including an Air Force colonel and another Air Force pilot. A mass witness event. We have the video footage from that. Very poor quality. It was just somebody. That's the one where you hear the young guy going, "Holy damn hot shit!" Look, that good old boy from Louisiana. He was great. So you got to make this real, folks. I mean, it is real. He was very excited. Very adorable. Yeah. I thought it was great. Anyway, and so right after that, there was a conference organized in Atlanta the following month, April '92. And the head of Army Intelligence, General Albert Stubblebine III, and NSA operative and a CIA guy wanted me to come. They put me, I thought it was just me in the audience, they put me at the table and then took me to a hotel room afterwards and basically said, "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Because they knew we had broken the Rosetta Stone of contact, because it involves extraterrestrial technologies that interface with field consciousness and very exotic, what Neuralink's trying to do with Elon Musk right now, but in an applied way out under the stars. So they were very upset. They threatened me. And I said, "Look, I don't recognize your authority on this. Your projects are being run illegally. I'm a free citizen of the earth, and we are going to proceed." So if you know me well, you know it's kind of how I am. I get pushed on, I push harder. But that led to then me organizing with this wonderful man who's since passed away, Maury Albertson, who was one of the co-founders of the Peace Corps, and Dr. Brian O'Leary. And in Colorado State University, we're going to have this conference pulling together all the researchers. Before the public conference, we had a gathering at the St. Malo's retreat in Estes Park. And this is when the general who came offered me $2 billion and a board seat on the majority joint intelligence committee operations dealing with this. This was a serious offer of utter corruption and bribery. The money was going to be placed within my use out of a fund in Eastern Europe after the fall of the Cold War, where they had seized huge amounts of money, black money, slush money. I said, "No, thank you. I'm not interested." And so it goes. So this then progresses to, we are continuing our efforts. More people from the government are reaching out to me. Now, keep in mind, I'm a young doctor with four little children and a golden retriever and a full-time plus working in the emergency trauma. all night, all day, that kind of stuff. So we decided, however, we needed to have an outreach to the Clinton administration. And so in the summer of 1993, I was invited to the Monroe Institute, where they trained a lot of the CIA remote viewers and what have you, for a meeting to set up a team that would reach out to the administration, the Pentagon, so that we could deconflict and so our operations would not conflict with theirs. Basically, it was a deconfliction program between the CE5 contact initiative and the US government. A lot of people don't know this. I'm going through this so you have a sense of the progression of this. So we reached out, and there were some people who found out about what we were doing through that network. Wasn't involved, a CIA and State Department guy. He was actually State Department officially, but he was CIA. And also my senior military advisor, who had befriended me at that point, who was a Navy intelligence guy who had been in Unacknowledged project. And one project he was in, $3 billion, no one outside that project knew about it. That's SAP, Special Access Project. So about then, a man contacted me from the Rockefeller family, George Lamb, his right-hand assistant, and said, look, we're very interested in what you're doing. We're organizing a gathering at the Rockefeller Ranch, the JY Ranch, and the Tetons. And I said, great, let's go. I'll be happy to come. But by then, we had already had a meeting set up at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, where a lot of the original ET material was sent. And we were meeting with FASTIC, the Foreign Aerospace Science Technology Center. It had been FTD, the Foreign Technology Division of the Air Force. It's now called NAIC, National Air Intelligence Center. So they changed the name every decade or two, but it's the same entity with the same assets that are still there, by the way. Memo to the investigators in the Pentagon and Congress. So that meeting was to meet with the intelligence officials there. It was set up under the orders of J2, the head of Intelligence Joint Chiefs of Staff. At the time, that was Admiral Kramer, before Admiral Wilson, you'll hear about in a moment. And Admiral Kramer very much wanted us to take that meeting. The Air Force refused. He ordered the head of Air Force Intelligence to make it happen. And that's how that meeting happened. And it happened right after the gathering at the Rockefeller Ranch with a group of UFO researchers. Now, when I got to that meeting, Lawrence, Mr. Rockefeller, and some of the others had no idea what we were doing on this inside track, providing information to the US government and to the Clinton administration through channels that had reached out to us. And so they were kind of astonished. And I said, well, yeah, but it has to happen sometime. So that's how that whole early days started, just to give you this sort of overview, which most of you, I probably don't know this. As a result of that, I had a man reach out to me who had seen the report of our contact event in Florida in '92. He was head of the Arlington Institute, John Peterson. He wrote a book called The Road to 2012 under contract for the Coast Guard, but it was really for the whole military. And in it, he mentions, without naming us, one of the wild cards of the future would be a group of people setting up protocols. They make contact with ETs, and this whole subject comes out. Well, that didn't happen because you'll hear in a minute, the media doesn't much report on things that the CIA doesn't want them to. But nevertheless, that was in the report. Now, we weren't named, but he reached out to me and he said, a friend of mine who's been on my board is the incoming director of the CIA, R. James Woolsey, for Clinton. And they would like for you to meet. Now, Woolsey has since denied that the meeting was about what we're about to tell you. But one thing I found about Washington as a young and naive doctor, how do you know they're lying? Their lips are moving. So, yes, I'm nothing if not honest and direct. So what happened with this is that the meeting was set up under cover. My wife was there. It was in December 13th, 1993. And the paperwork we have, which if challenged, we will release in full, states clearly The Clinton administration has been denied access to this. The CI director has gotten no information on this UFO subject, and therefore they want you to provide whatever information you have, because we had already started collecting a great deal of data, even by 93, 30 years ago. So the result, of course, was that the meeting took place, and he was very upset. It was a 2-3 hour meeting, cover story, dinner party, okay, out in Arlington. And so that's how the whole process began. Subsequently, the president did want to try to get to the bottom of this. And you're going to see in a little bit what happened as we go through this presentation. He was not successful at getting control over the project. So this brings me to a very key data point. No president since Eisenhower has had operational control and oversight, nor has the Congress, over the UAP UFO projects. They are a priori unconstitutional, illegal operations. We can prove this in a court, and we will. So we're going to roll through this, as fast as we can. 1995, we had the first gathering at Asilomar, California, of top secret witnesses, including a Russian KGB guy and Marina Popovich of the famous Popovich astronaut, cosmonaut family. And that was when everyone signed that famous letter to the Clinton administration from Project Starlight. So from 1993 until the late 90s, this whole operation was called Project Starlight. It was a code name that Mr. Peterson put on it, and it was not called the Disclosure Project because it wasn't public. We were trying to try to get the government to do things quietly before we did. So by the end of the 97 period, we had a meeting with offsite at the Westin Hotel in Georgetown here for members of Congress. So the chairman of the Government Reform and Oversight Committee came, Dan Burton, and a number of others. And that event had about 12 of these military whistleblowers and people who had top secret clearance who had been involved. We encouraged Congress to do what they're doing now. Now look at the date, it's 26 years ago. It's taking a lot of patience here in Washington. Things move very slowly, but now they're taking off. And so by 97, 98, I had concluded neither the Congress nor the president was going to act. And so we wrote an unless otherwise directed letter. What is that? It's a military strategy tactic that you basically write up through the chain of command and all the officials, unless otherwise directed, this is our assessment, this is what we're going to do, unless you tell us otherwise. So we wrote this letter, it's on our website, it's in the book, and it went to all the relevant agencies, return receipt requested, and hand delivered to a number of key people in the White House. We never, to this day, to this minute, have been told we were incorrect in our assessment, and it is as follows. The projects are the most illegally run projects in the history of the United States. They have escaped the supervision of the president and the Congress and key members of Congress, of the Pentagon. Because by this point, I had briefed the head of intelligence for the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Admiral Tom Wilson, who was flat out denied access and was threatened, and also threatened with a demotion, take a star off his lapel. That's a fact. And that was at a stand-up briefing at the Pentagon in April of 97. So by this point, I had concluded none of the congressmen had, at that point, the courage to move forward with a bill or hearing, and the executive branch had been shut down, completely waved off. And so we decided to start the Disclosure Project. And so here we are. And so during that period from 98, 2000, somewhere in there, we continued to do briefings, encouraging and gathering more and more of these whistleblowers. So by 1999, I had this meeting with the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, General Patrick Hughes, as a last gasp attempt to get the legal government to get this under their control. Unfortunately, when we had the meeting, he went over to his bookshelf and took down a little E.T. doll like you'd get at a toy store. And he's in a rage. This is General Patrick Hughes, the 3-star. He says, this is all I've gotten for my inquiries about this through the chain of command and the Defense Intelligence Agency. Meanwhile, I had a top secret TSSCI guy in the DIA who had been read into the projects, but they were lying to the old man at the top. You cannot do this. This is absolutely insubordination and treason. to do it. So here's the problem. That has gone through every branch of the government. We've been involved with every branch, from CIA, Pentagon, Congress, NSA, what have you. Now, are there people in those entities that know? Yes, but they're part of a clandestine organization and operation that is not being run constitutionally and legally. Therefore, all operations related to this, and all whistleblowers, and all content, material, extraterrestrial bodies, physical items, can be disclosed without punishment under the national security laws of the United States, because the underlying operation is a priori unconstitutional and illegal. So, my friends, that is the foundation of the Disclosure Project. Because look, it took a lot of time to go through all those aspects of the government from 1992 until 2001 to give the government the opportunity to come clean. But it turned out the people that we had access to were denied access. So they didn't have an all-access pass. They may have had top secret SCI. They might have been the president. They may have been the director of the CIA. They may have been the Secretary of Defense. In the case of Cohen, Gordon Cooper gave him all the information about the footage he filmed of a craft landing in the dry lake bed at Edwards. Gordon Cooper and I were at a lecture here in DC, and he told me point blank, the Secretary of Defense could not find that evidence. It had disappeared into some compartment that he had no access to. This is the Secretary of Defense. So all of these people are what I call an inverse witness. The witnesses are people who directly know. The inverse ones are the ones that sure as heck should have known, but have been denied access. And the inverse ones are more important in the sense they prove what we can do going forward, that these projects are in fact a rogue, unconstitutional, and illegal operation, period. Okay, so you all know we did the 2001 press conference on May 9th. Andy Card was personally handed by one of our witnesses the big briefing document we did for the Congress and the President. All 565 members of Congress received this personally. They didn't act. It's taken a while. And so we just continued outreach to the public, building more witnesses and evidence. And then we started saying, you know what, we're going to start doing some documentaries. So we released Sirius in 2013 to educate the public. It became #1 in the world. Unacknowledged has had over 750 million people see it. That was 2017. Mr. Mazzola, the director, is here with us. 2020, Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind. And next, you'll see The Cosmic Hoax was released in 2021. And it deals with the fact of they're going to stage and have been staging a threat from outer space, which is not existent. It's called a false flag. So we had the 20th anniversary in Scottsdale, and we had a Russian general disclose that one of their nuclear weapons was overheating, and an ET group came in. Everyone was sort of put in suspension, time-space suspension, and they fixed it so it wouldn't detonate. So the ETs are very concerned about these weapons, but they're not here to attack us. They're here to keep us from blowing ourselves to pieces. This is the narrative most people have flipped upside down through the counterintelligence and disinformation from the CIA, Hollywood, and the media. So eventually, progress. I mentioned this event in 2022 in February when a senior member of the U.S. government intelligence community reached out, and we began to help them figure out where this stuff is. And then, thankfully, finally, December 2022, they passed the National Defense Authorization Act, making a pathway for whistleblowers to come forward, notwithstanding their NDAs or anything else, through the Arrow project at the Pentagon and give their testimony. And that information is supposed to be returned back to the members of Congress. Although we'll talk about this in a bit, it's not quite happening as accurately as it should. And the chairs of the co-chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee have written a letter concerned about that. In 2023, we began to bring the first of these gentlemen to the SCIF at Arrow, the Secure Compartment Information Facility. He is here with us today, a Lieutenant Colonel Heckert, trailblazer hero of the country. Thank you. So that is kind of caught us up to where we are now. Now, in this is a lot to unpack, but next. So this just goes through, I wanted to show you this slide. This is the letter itself. The AP had to sue to get this out of the Clinton archives. Next. All the people who signed it, Rockefeller's people, all the witnesses, Marina Popovich. Next. This is just to establish the dot. This is Lawrence Rockefeller wanting us to get involved to help and for him to help us. Next. Yeah, wonderful man. That's him with Hillary Clinton. After we provided this information, they had a meeting at the Rockefeller Ranch where this was discussed, but the Clintons couldn't pursue it too far. Next. And then we have, just more of this going back and forth with Lawrence and his team. Next. And this, you can see, is the to the Clinton administration, and you'll see that we did a set of recommendations that includes everything happening now, 30 years later. Fantastic. So all of that, and we have all these in our archive. So a lot of people say, did these meetings happen, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, they all happen, but to what end? Well, I kind of feel like we have to be cosmic Johnny Appleseeds, sowing some seeds. They take a while to germinate and sprout. But now they're sprouting. We hope they come to fruition. So now I want to talk about this. We're going to go through some of this content, the Disclosure Project Intelligence Archive, the DPIA, what we're calling it. Now, next. So it has to include the intelligence assessments about UAPs. Next. And here are the primary conclusions, all right? Now, first of all, there are two kinds of UAPs. Now, this archive is, once all of it gets scanned in, it'll be probably between 12 and 20 terabytes. And currently, it's around 5 terabytes of data. And we'll go through this in a minute. But there are extraterrestrial vehicles and man-made so-called ARVs. There's no such thing as a UFO and a UAP. They're not unidentified. They don't just fly, and they're not just objects. UAP, unexplained aerial phenomenon. What is this, ball lightning? No, these are all terms that are invented because they are obfuscating the truth. They're hiding the truth by their very name. So the reality is there are at least two events going on. The extraterrestrial craft, which is probably less right now than the man-made alien reproduction vehicles, which are actually very high-tech electromagnetic gravity control objects. And we have multiple people here who you'll be hearing from this afternoon who have seen these, okay? Or the technologies related to it. So the groups are not hostile that are off planet, but they're extremely concerned about our hostility to the point of surveilling every single nuclear facility and incident, because when a nuclear or atomic bomb is detonated, an electromagnetic pulse goes out, but attendant to that, and you'll hear this tomorrow from Dr. Zahari, there's also a scalar type of energy that is through the entangled quantum entanglement aspects in physics, which means it goes out beyond our solar system. It scrambles and disrupts extraterrestrial communication and navigation. I'll be blunt. This is why, as soon as we detonated the first atomic bomb at White Sands in 1945, there were ET craft there. Why were they at Roswell? Because we had the only atomic bomb squadron in the world, the 509th, was at Roswell Army Air Base, and later became Air Force. But at that time, it was still the U.S. Army Air Corps. So this is the history, and the reason they are concerned is that we're not only become an existential threat to us, but to all life on Earth with these weapons, but we are actually viewed as a threat out there. So everyone likes to flip this around, that there's the alien threat. My friends, if you are thousands to millions of years technologically more advanced than we were in 1945 with vacuum tubes and no integrated circuits and nothing up in space, flying around in propeller craft or maybe early jets and rockets, if they were hostile, we would have had this enterprise on Earth shut down immediately. But they have the patience of Job to have put up with this nonsense for 80 years. So in reality, humans are viewed as the aggressors. This is a real problem. And people don't want to hear this, but it's just the truth. The technology's been studied and reverse engineered, absolutely true. And the breakthroughs in energy, propulsion, communications, which we'll hear about, are phenomenal. Faster than speed of light communication systems, tracking systems, and weapon systems, but also electromagnetic-gravitic, so-called anti-gravity, pop term, not what it really is. It's electromagnetic field propulsion, and energy generation. So we just released the lost century, and it documents 100 years of this lost century of technology. And the importance of that can't be overemphasized, because it means that we could immediately get off oil, gas, coal, nuclear power, wind, solar, geothermal, all of it. And you would be able to have something that would sit on this podium, would run your house or your building or your factory, pulling energy out of this baseline 0-point quantum vacuum energy field, which is what ET craft are using. They're not using a rocket, for heaven's sakes. And, but that would transform the world into a paradise. Poverty would be gone in 20 years or less, and there would be no pollution within 10. They would go down, and then we could clean up the mess we've made. This is a civilizational advancement that has been withheld for 100 years by corrupt interests in collusion, mostly corporate, with government entities that are not serving the interests of the American public or humanity. Full stop. Now, these also go into that these operations have been targeting ET craft using these technology. How do you go from interstellar capability and travel, go over Roswell and crash? Well, the UFO community, they say, well, there's a thunderstorm nearby. I assure you, if you can navigate interstellar space, you can make it through a New Mexico thunderstorm. Yeah, right? So this gets into this very important thing that we have a document from a field agent for the FBI to J. Edgar Hoover about this crash disk that they retrieved because we had switched on a new, quote, radar system. Now, let me explain military euphemisms. A radar system can be used to paint and bounce off waves off of an aircraft to track it. It's radar, is what you think of. But they can have embedded with them, piggybacked, an active warfare system, particularly electromagnetic warfare systems. That's what that was. It was an early scalar weapon system. And that's how those craft came down. So this has become a huge problem because if you have the national military command authorities, often left out of this, the president and the Congress. Now that wasn't true in 47, it is true now. Not read into or controlling this, you have a rogue group that is a threat to peace here and peace elsewhere. That has got to be reined in and put under constitutional oversight and control immediately, as in decades ago. And so these end up being crimes against the whole world. If you look at what has happened, how many people die each year from just particulate matter in the air from pollution? 5 million. It's almost the number of deaths of the Holocaust every year. It's unnecessary because we don't need it. Now, the people in oil fields won't like this, but after 150 years, they've had a good ride. They've made a few $1,000 trillion, have fun. They're not wanting for money. And I just want to say, I do applaud the actions of the U.S. Congress, and particularly the 16 senators, that's 1/6 of the Senate, recently wrote a letter encouraging the Pentagon to increase the pace of this. There are some people who are really leaning into this strong, like Senator Gillibrand and Marco Rubio and Senator Warner and some others. And before he left, Senator Blunt. And they're very much keen to get to the bottom of it. And luckily now, they know there's something very real here. Now, I want to take a quick trip here. In this disclosure project, intelligence archive, let's go to the map. What we have here is the sites, black sites, military sites, corporate sites. where we now have 145 of these that we've identified where these classified, covert, and mostly illegal projects are occurring. And they're all over the country and all over the world to an extent. Now, this is as of today. Every week, we're getting 1-2 more sites named by whistleblowers that are coming to us. We're adding more. Here's a list. Obviously, we'd be here all day to go through all of them and what's at each one. The key thing I want you to know, this entire archive has been delivered to the White House, the Senate, the Pentagon, and it has all the backup files from the whistleblowers telling who they are and where they were at these bases. Where is the northern gate for the Nevada test range, where the helo pad is, where a witness you're going to hear about later was retrieving ET craft just a few years ago, 2009. So I think this sort of information is what we call actionable intelligence for the Senate investigators, for the Pentagon investigators, and I think also the Department of Justice and FBI, because these operations are being run criminally. And if you had the leadership of this country put under oath who are in the oversight committees and the White House, they do not know this is going on. And the fact they don't is proof of the illegality of it. And this just goes on and on. Now, I just want you to know this is a work in progress. It's being added to, but every one of these sites is based on, all these black sites are based on information from whistleblowers who we have debriefed and who have written us and who have given us the information of where something is. For example, we have one from the Dugway Proving Grounds, recently surfaced, contractor for the C. Martin Corporation. He knew the Avery sector, he knew the building numbers, he knew where the underground, the DUM is, the deep underground military base is, and he knew what assets were there, including ours, the man-made UFOs, and the extraterrestrial one being studied. He also named a chief scientist who was there from the US government working on this. All that is in the Disclosure Project Intelligence Archive, all of it. It's all been handed off. So here's my message to Congress and to the White House and the Pentagon. No more excuses. You have everything you need. They have everything they need right now, I assure you. Great picture. Here's a facility most people don't know about, the Lockheed RCS Range underground entrance out in the Mojave Desert, taken by Michael Stratton, a little airplane. He was able to go there on a weekend close enough to snap this photograph. So this is where you can see they go in, they taxi, and then they go boom, underground. It's a big underground complex. People say, is this a myth? I go, no. Here's a photograph of it taken by our aerospace researcher and historian, Mr. Stratton. Next. This is a fun piece of the archive. We get things periodically. This is a apparent extraterrestrial being dissected between 1922 and 1928, according to the top medical historian in the world in terms of looking at the equipment. There's some damage on the emulsion. You can say this is a picture of a picture from the daughter, the granddaughter, I should say, of a woman who was at Los Alamos, worked on the A-bomb, and then was moved over to Roswell and was at Roswell when that event happened. She was called in to see a picture by a work colleague at Roswell, and he had this. Apparently, we're speculating here, but it appears that they had older retrieval operations going way back. And those files were brought in so that they would have some reference point for looking at and dissecting the bodies that were retrieved out of the Roswell event. So now we're trying to find other witnesses to this, but it's 100 years old. But this is just a very interesting factoid. This goes back quite some time, long before Roswell. And here I want to talk about one of the problems with what we're going to introduce next, and that's the witness list, the WIT list. That witness list is now 752 people. Some of them are direct, some are POCs to them, points of contact. And it's growing pretty much every week. We're making a call today for more courageous people like our military witnesses here to come forward. But here's what somebody wrote to me. I don't think I'll be able to give y'all what you need in coming to DC. I'm a fully disabled vet. And the whole issue of Black Ops Division, ability to act beyond any law, I just don't feel safe. I suffer too much as it is, etc. You can read it. Why am I sharing that? Because the 5 that are here are part of the 60, 70 we invited who are in fear of their life. And they're in fear of their pensions being taken away. So the people who are keeping this secret are thugs that are breaking every imaginable law in the United States, and they absolutely have to be put under control. So we'll just let this roll for a minute. You'll see that this witness list, we have the contact information blacked out. These names are the ones who have come forward, and we already have their testimony. All these that are named. It's about 100. It's a massive body of evidence. You can see these. We have published them. I encourage you to read. However, at about page 100, the rest are black, except the notes of what they're going to testify to. Now this file, in its entirety, but this is just the Excel spreadsheet. The actual backup files with all the testimonies and all the correspondence and what these whistleblowers have told us are all in the hands of the US government as of Tuesday, this past Tuesday. They have all this. Now, why is that important? Because the news media, in reporting on the recent whistleblower, said, well, this young guy didn't have any direct information from being in these facilities. Every single one of these 752 people are not people who were tried to look into it but didn't get in. They were in, or they were accidentally in, or they came across it. Every one of them. There's none of them that are secondhand. Not one. And this is a very important distinction. And I think that the media and the Congress and the Pentagon need to understand this is 30 years of our work. Look, we've spent millions of dollars doing this. We're giving it for free. We just say, please, dear God, get to the bottom of it, fix it. Now, we're running out of time to fix this problem. I'll tell you, absolutely we are. And you'll hear that tomorrow. Why we're out of time. Tick-tock. Things don't stand still. 80 years into this charade, time's up. And we need to let it be known that these corporations and operations that are being run illegally, you are out of time also. And we will take all actions to correct that. We will. And when you look at this list, I'm going to go through a few of them just to give you a flavor of what we've gotten from some of these additional 600 and some witnesses that do not want to be named. Now, one thing I get criticized for this, well, you'll share something, but where is that person? And when I talk to the media, they're all cynical and skeptical, which is fine. That's what the media is supposed to be. But I go, no, but wait, we already have 80 of them on the record. Have you looked at that? Oh, no. See, here's the problem. Even when you put everything on a silver platter, they'll say, well, there's no evidence. Where are the people who actually handled the craft and the bodies? We have them. They've already come out. But it's really, we're an unfunded, non-governmental entity. We cannot be expected to do the entire job of the United States government with their trillions of dollars. We have no staff. All of this has happened through volunteers. So at a certain point, we, the people, have to write to our representatives, your 2 senators, your House of Representative member, and the president, and say, this has been handed to you. I have the return receipt proof from the FedEx that it was received. Now, you need to go. It's time to go. You need to pursue this in the interest of the people. So this goes on and on and on. We're only at 400 and some. Each of these little comments on the right are little quick synopses of what they were going to say. If you were to sit and read all 100 pages of this witness list, you would fall out of your chair. We don't have time to go through it all. It'd be here a week. So we can move on to the next slide. And one of the things I want to go back to is this history of secrecy. So let's get to this slide, next one. This is when everything went sideways. So just for those of you wanting to know the history of this, how do we go from during Truman and early Eisenhower, properly overseen but highly classified R&D, to the situation we're in now with rogue operations? There's a progression. You need to understand how it happened, when it happened, most importantly, why it happened. But here, I always tell people, please don't take my word for anything. I'm a retired doctor. I have never had a clearance. I've never been in the U.S. government. I've never got an Indian head nickel from a contractor or the government, although I paid a few $1 million in taxes. They can just say thank you at this point. Those of us who actually pay taxes. But I will say that you look at this gentleman, he's one of the first, there was a short interim CIA director when it was founded in 47 after Roswell. This gentleman, Admiral Roscoe Hillenkoetter, was a very early one for about 3 years. And look at what he said. It's time for the truth to come out. This was in 1961 in a letter to the New York Times that Eisenhower said, beware of the military-industrial complex, right? And he said that though through official secrecy and ridicule, many citizens are led to believe the unknown of flyings are nonsense. He says, I urge immediate congressional action. Now remember, this is 62 years ago. I urge immediate congressional action to reduce the dangers from secrecy about UFOs. He didn't say the UFOs were dangerous. That's the threat narrative that's all in the media now and the charlatans and the whole, UAP community. In reality, he was saying the secrecy is a threat to the national security. So in my first meetings with these guys in DC 16 months ago, I said, you've been gaslit. Here's the problem. Go get a mirror and look at it. It's humans. And the secrecy around this is an existential threat to the constitutional government of the United States of America and every other country in the world that I know of that I've had contacts. And then we have this. How long has this been noted to be of such high secrecy? Look at this from 1950. A top secret memo from the Canadian government. Next. Hello. And you'll see this is top secret. It was declassified accidentally, I've learned, from the Canadian government with a tranche of other documents back, I think, in the Carter years. And in it, next, he describes the matter is the most highly classified subject in the United States government, rating higher than the H-bomb. This is an official document, not controversial. Flying saucers exist, period. Their modus operandi, meaning their technology, how they fly, how they move, is unknown, but a concentrated effort is being made by a small group headed by Dr. Vannevar Bush. Dr. Vannevar Bush headed up the Manhattan Project, just so you know. And the entire, the entire matter is considered by the United States authorities to be of tremendous significance. But look at A, higher secrecy than the development of the hydrogen bomb. We didn't detonate the first hydrogen bomb until 1952. This is 1950. So that gives you an idea of the extreme secrecy stood up around this between 1945 and this period. And that's where things began to go sideways. Next. Next. And so all kinds of things began to happen. You are familiar with this document? It's the death warrant for Marilyn Monroe. And I got this from a man whose name I have, and he's in our witness list from the National Security Agency vault. It's a CIA document from 1962, dated a day or two before they found her dead. And the wiretap summary basically goes into the fact that she was going to hold a press conference like this, except it'd be Marilyn Monroe, about her having had this relationship with the Kennedy, with Jack Kennedy, the president, and what he had told her about the, quote, objects from outer space from New Mexico from the 40s. Clear reference to what happened in the 40s. This document has been looked at by the chief document authenticator who was right-hand to General Odom at the National Security Agency, who's been on my team. He's since passed away. He says, without me pulling this out of the vault myself, this is real. It's top secret. Now, it has not been declassified. And when he gave it to me, he sent it to me in this huge Xerox sheet. We still have the original in my archive. I said, that doesn't matter. We've already declared these projects illegal a priori. I don't care if it has a top secret stamp on it. We're releasing it. Because they cannot cite the rule of law and impose the law when they themselves are a corrupt criminal enterprise. Ask an attorney. oh yeah, and I got a death threat for doing this. I said, oh, go away. I'm in the ER with, gang members with Tech 9s in my face. Okay, next. So this gets into a sort of a transcript of it. I'm not going to read it to you. It's in our book and on our website, but it basically describes what she was going to do. She was also calling an art dealer friend of hers, Rothberg in New York, and Dorothy Kilgallen, who was a reporter. Kilgallen is the one who got Lord Mountbatten and the royal family interested in this, because Lord Mountbatten, as you know, had one of these objects land on his estate. And that's why the royal family, Prince Philip and Prince Charles, have always been very interested in this and subscribed to Flying Saucer Review. It's an old periodical from the UK, excellent actually. It's Gordon Crichton's one of our witnesses. He was MI6, and he just published a great journal every quarter or month, I can't remember, but the royal family subscribed to it. Next. So here I just want to give you a quick tour de force of the corrupt alleged investigations. Now let me be clear. Project Blue Book started early on, 50s, was shut down in 1969. They had a storefront office, J. Allen Hynek, Dr. Hynek admits this. They received information. The really important cases went into a black vault somewhere. And those are the files that would be very interesting. They were never released. But that project was mainly a PR stunt to make it look like we're investigating it, endless investigations, but there's nothing there. There's nothing there behind the curtain. So it is a PR stunt. Every investigation in the history of the subject by the US government has been hijacked into a dog and pony show to gaslight the members of Congress, the president, the press, and the American people. That is a fact. 1953, the Robertson Report. This report was also done to basically shut down any further inquiries from the government. We had the forward hearings in 68, and then one of my favorite, the Condon Report. So now you're going to pull in, you see this happening now, we're going to pull in these academics from the University of Colorado, Professor Condon, and he put a committee together under contract with the Air Force to study, do we even still need to investigate UFOs? And they concluded, oh no, you don't need to. And the fix was in. Next, or then NASA in 2022. So this is one of the problems. The Aero office put this out after this whistleblower, that we don't have any evidence that there's any extraterrestrial component to this, et cetera. You can read this. The problem is, I am communicating with people who have been in the skiff at Aero who have testified that in fact there are. Now, either this spokeswoman is lying to the American public or she's not being informed by the people who are doing this. But either way, this messaging, I'm saying this right now, this came out this week, needs to stop immediately. You cannot misrepresent and lie to the American public. Say no comment, but do not put out a statement that is a bold-faced lie, which we can prove is a lie. Next. Now, one of these things, these are just sort of the highlights of some of these documents we got after I briefed the director of the CIA. The debunking aim would result in reduction in public interest in flying saucers, which today evokes a strong psychological reaction. This education could be accomplished by mass media, such as television, motion pictures, and popular articles. This is this Robertson panel trying to shut down public interest in this through psychological warfare and counterintelligence in 1953. This document is many, many pages long. We have it, it's in the archive. We have tens of thousands of pages of government documents like this in the Disclosure Project Intelligence Archive. Someday I'd like to have all of it up on the internet. If somebody knows how to build an internet site and create a database for 8 terabytes of content, give me a jingle. All right, I don't know how to do that. Next. And so this is Professor Condon. I already mentioned him. He was an agent of the CIA. Next. And here we have a document where it basically is talking about they didn't want, you can read this on your own, he was an asset of the CIA and admits it here, but we can't let the public know that he is. So this was supposed to be an independent academic study. It was tainted and it was a dog and pony show, and we can prove it. We have the documents to prove it. We also have, next, here is a blow up of it. Any work performed by, to Dr. Gordon Condon in his investigation will not be identified as work accomplished by the CIA. So in other words, it's work accomplished by the CIA, but we won't identify it as such. This is clear corruption by the CIA on an internal investigation where they are banned from doing things like this in the United States. They're only to be foreign operations. And they're corrupting this study presented to the public as an academic impartial study. And here's the proof that it was corrupted from the get-go. This is an official CIA document, officially released by the CIA that we got. Next. And this goes on without, this is more documentation. Next. So, visit of Dr. Condon for this. So it goes on and on. There's all these, this is 67. The Condon report 69. So he was an operative for a few years being put in place to set up this fake study. We cannot let that happen again, my friends. We have to be watchdogs of these studies being done by Aero, NASA, all this, all the alphabet soup, because they will be corrupted this way if we don't watch out for it. Next. Here's a man, great man, one of our Disclosure Project witnesses, Dr. Robert Wood. He was the McDonnell Douglas aerospace engineer, Phantom Works, it's now part of Boeing. And when you can go to the next slide, he stated this: I wrote a letter to Condon suggesting that it might be helpful if we were to establish this group in two parts, and believers, disbelievers, and stuff. Basically what happened, he came in with a suitcase full of evidence because he had been sent by old man McDonnell to investigate the UFOs way back, the McDonnell Douglas founder. And Condon, when he realized he had hard evidence and cases, went to James McDonnell. Look at this. So Condon was so furious, he went to the head of McDonnell Douglas to get him fired. He threw him off the committee. So in other words, our minds are made up. Someone who had evidence, dispositive proof, was thrown off the committee. This is what's happened over and over and over again with all of these US government and academic reports. Next. Now I just want to mention this gentleman. We have a man here who will speak a little bit later, I hope. James Goodall, renowned aerospace historian and illustrator, is here. So one of our VIP guests. But Ben Rich, head of the Lockheed Skunk Works, through the work of great work in sleuthing of Michael Schratt, we found this correspondence. Next. A friend of his wrote and said, you know, are these man-made or are they extraterrestrial? Now this is out of their own archive. This is the man who wrote it. This is his letter. His wife, I believe, gave it to Mr. Schratt. And here's Ben Rich's reply. Next. Dear John, yes, I'm a believer in both categories, and if anything, I feel anything is possible. Many of our man-made UFOs are unfunded opportunities. I mean, they'd have huge value if they were deployed for commercial, normal use for humanity. And so he acknowledges that there are both, that we have these, and he just says many of our, look at the letterhead, Lockheed Advanced Aeronautics Company. See the letterhead? So people say, is this some kind of conspiracy theory that these things exist in these aerospace giants? I go, no. The head of the Lockheed Skunk Works admitted that they have these UFOs. And some people call them ARVs, alien reproduction vehicles, because they were helped be developed from studying the extraterrestrial material. Next. So here we had this from Mr. Goodall. Next. I mentioned that already. And one of the things that is interesting, I think a week or two before he died, Mr. Goodall testified at the 20th anniversary of the Disclosure Project that he had, in fact, talked to him, and he said, the things that are out there in the desert are like beyond Star Trek and beyond, and we've already done it. Amazing, yeah. Later we'll be able to ask him to come up. Now I want to go through some of these witnesses not here. Why do I want to do this? Because they've given us this information. They are not comfortable yet being public, but I think it's important for you to know. Here's one of the incoming letters from this one witness I just called TB. And he was cleared across 16 to 18 of these unacknowledged special access projects with the Technical Management Office in the Pentagon and other operations in the sub-basement of the Pentagon. And also he was a CID investigator for the Pentagon. Next. And so these are some of the events that he got involved with. This is artwork from Mr. Schratt and his team. One of these crash retrieval operations in Lawton, Oklahoma. And these are illustrations based on his testimony and information he's given on some of these mishaps and downings. Here's a drawing of the shape of the object on in, and then a top view. And next. They're quite interesting aircraft. And next. These are great. I love this artwork. Here's one of the small bodies. About, some of them around 3 feet length. Now, people say, where are the whistleblowers who handled this? We have them. I've debriefed them. They need to be protected. They need to be given amnesty if there's anything in their past that's questionable, and they need to have clearly the ability to talk without losing their pensions. This man signed an 80-year non-disclosure agreement. He's a disabled veteran. He's a hero of the country, but he doesn't want to lose his pension because he was a career military and then career civilian government. And so he's just scared because he's a deep insider who was in these programs for 10 years, from 2000 up through 2010, 11, like that. So next, this is just showing one of the underground facilities he was in that monitor these sort of activities. Here's one that is being studied. There was an underground facility where one of these craft was being studied by a group of folks. A scandal happened where a 3-star general brought in a girlfriend who was an executive with Booz Allen Hamilton, who was not cleared to be in there. And this witness, TB, got involved to look at prosecuting the general for violating that security protocol. But it turned out nobody could prosecute him. He became an untouchable. He did lose a star. He went from a 3-star to a 2-star. I have the general's name. He's still living. He can be subpoenaed, and he should be. Next. And this is one of these battlefield weapons where you can put an electromagnetic device on it, which renders them completely invisible. All kinds of applications to these technologies. Next. So here's the other one I want to go. I'm going to go through these fairly quickly because in the interest of time, I want to give you a flavor of these guys that are in the archive who aren't here. That's what I'm trying to do. One thing before we move on to this one, TB, this Pentagon guy, he also had been at a facility in Orange County. We know the exact location. And underneath an office building in suburbia is a SCIF, a secure compartment information facility and lab, where they're studying extraterrestrial material, and there are ET bodies there. We know where it is. It's actionable intelligence. A strike team can get in there and get it if they want to. We have all this information. So it's granular, specific information, actionable from firsthand, top secret people. This is the emphasis here. He also knows of a large place outside of another SCIF that had to be built into the side of a mountain outside of Seoul, South Korea, because one of these objects was downed and it was too big to move. And so they actually had to cover it up out there and then bore out a huge part of the mountain to put it there where it can be then studied in situ, meaning right there on site. And he knows the location of that. He also knows what we have developed that are on satellite systems that can target an area of space towards the ground or out that would disable all electronics so that aircraft, whether extraterrestrial or human, can just drop out of the sky. They don't have to be shot down, etc. Next. So this gentleman, we're just calling him MS. He's the Dugway gentleman I referred to earlier, recently got hold of us in the last couple of months. This is when he was there in 2009 to 2013. This is called the Ghost Building, is what it was termed, and it was very quickly put together. There was an extraterrestrial vehicle in this facility. He got to know the top scientists studying this. Again, this is not 70 years ago at Roswell or what have you. It's recent. Here's another view of it. You can see there's sort of an upside-down triangular object that seems to be part of its propulsion device. This is not human. This is extraterrestrial vehicle. And here are other angles of it, drawings that he saw from various positions. He worked for the C. Martin Company as a contractor at Dugway. Most people never heard of that company, but again, they should be subject to a subpoena and to investigations. Next. And then he was also told and introduced to this deep underground facility, room for 1,000 cars to park there, but this little entrance, it goes down quite deep into the earth and big enough on the elevator to even put Air Force One. Just illustrate that there, very, very large. But apparently it goes down to an interconnected complex. He says is 1,300 square miles, which would be 30 miles by 40 something like that. Now, he didn't go in there. This is what the scientists who worked in this area said it was, but that scientist can be subpoenaed and interviewed because we have his name. Next. And then he went into a building when he was first there, and he got a badge that let him in accidentally to when he shouldn't have gotten in. It was he walks in, he sees this photograph of this strange-looking ET with a group of scientists and a picture on the wall. Next. And, oh, I thought there was one of the actual group. Oh, maybe it fell out of there. Was there another one? No? Oh, okay. There's also a drawing of this ET being dissected and then one that's living with these group of scientists around him. And that we have multiple witnesses of that sort of event. One of the witnesses we have in our old archive was an Army intelligence guy who was at Camp Peary out here near Williamsburg, where the last surviving ET from the Roswell episode was there in a crate in a cage with boxer shorts on. So tragic. And shortly thereafter, I understand that even extraterrestrial biological entity died, but he saw it and he has provided testimony to that effect. He was he was Army intelligence gentleman. Contacted us right before he died. So we have that information. Next. And now this is a very important case. His initials, TE. He gave you a little background. He was recruited out of Fort Campbell to be on a special team to retrieve conventional aircraft, jets, what have you, that go down because they have classified components on them. So you had to have a top secret clearance, and so he was pulled into that. That is how they usually introduce these folks. They give them that, then they move them on to this next. So after he did some of the conventional retrievals of mishaps and accidents, he was moved into a special unit out of the Northern Nevada test range, where the nuclear weapons testings took place. And there's a helo base there, and he knows where the gate is, all the details of this. And this was recent. This was in 2005. And there was this is one of ours. You can see the rivets and the seams. Not extraterrestrial. They don't need seams. And this are rivets. I'll tell you how they're manufactured later. But this was the schematic of what he retrieved. This is a man-made, probably it's either a Raytheon or Northrop triangular anti-gravity craft. Now, he didn't know which corporation built this one, but we have witnesses here you'll hear from today who one of them was a Raytheon contact who saw those. Next. And this was later, after he did some of those initial retrievals, and we have many more events like this. Each of these witnesses could be an hour. I'm just trying to run through quickly. And this was an extraterrestrial vehicle we had stunned with an electromagnetic directional weapon and it went down on the northern range, but it did not get damaged too bad. It was stunned. And initially what happened, they came in, the Delta Force guys were in charge of the operation. He said I was a garbage man, meaning he was just a guy to be in a hazmat suit picking up pieces. He literally says that's all I was. Sometimes these, lower ranking people are the ones who really get to come forward because they weren't in charge per se. And here's the drawing of the operation. The helicopter came in, unloaded the whole crew, Delta Force, and then his other folks. He knows the names of his colleagues, but most of them were cover names. There was an alien reproduction vehicle in the air above it. At some point, this thing started glowing and coming back alive, and this man-made ARV took off, boom, because it knew it needed to get out of there. As the chopper in the air, all personnel on the ground, just like the Russian general talking about that a nuclear weapon overheating, they just basically became frozen, not hurt at all. An ET, two ETs actually came up to him. So we can just stay right there. And then what happened is when it started doing this, shortly thereafter, after he had a little bit of communication with these two ETs, they were teleported instantly. The helicopters, the men, everything back to the helicopter base. Just like that. And the ETs didn't hurt a soul, but they moved them on, and they warned him that you need to immediately stop doing this. We're not going to put up with this anymore. It was a very clear message to this witness. A wonderful man. Here's the drawings of the two ETs, a male and a female, somewhat human looking, and around 5 feet tall, no external ears, etc. And this thing gets into a more complicated. All of you know about alien abductions. Here's the guys doing it. They're ours. These are special project. He was, long story short, he wanted to leave that unit after he realized what we were doing to these ET craft and that it was immoral and unwarranted, but they didn't want him out. And his father and uncle and grandfather had been involved in these projects. Often these people are familial, going all the way back to World War II and before. But his uncle was a very high-ranking Navy guy, came and got him out of that Nellis base. And then after he got out, he thought he'd be killed. They threatened him, everything. This particular event happened where he was driving back near his home in the northern Midwest, and he was driving along. His car comes to a stop, daytime. There's one of these ARVs there in the air, man-made. And then he looks, and there's this guy at his door. His engines won't move. Everything's frozen, electromagnetically stopped. And he realizes he's going to have something very bad happen to him. So he flings his door open. He was almost paralyzed, but he had enough willpower to, boom, knock this thing onto the ground and kick the stuffing out of it, thinking it was a biological ET or something. And of course, when he opened it, take a look what's in there. Integrated circuits, fiber optics. This is a robotic with a skin, he said, looked just like skin. It's one of the, quote, gray ETs. And he describes here how they move. They're very robotic, move very specifically. And these have been used for a very long time using man-made UFOs and these creatures to commit human abductions so that the public would think we're under alien attack. It's all a psychological warfare operation, every bit of it. Next. And then we have this gentleman who was at Guam, 2009. This is a Coast Guard ship, the buoy, servicing buoys out there. And they were called in on emergency assist because of a Japanese trawler, next. And this is his letter to me describing the whole incident. His name is redacted. And this was his ship. And it turned out that in a Japanese trawler, there was a craft that was stuck in the huge fishing net. And it was an extraterrestrial vehicle. And so they were called, they actually commandeered, they didn't, but the Marine force there commandeered the Japanese trawler, civilian, and said, you're stopping right here. And they put this in. This was so heavy, it tilted, 20, 30 degrees, their ship. They thought it was going to capsize. So he actually was above board. Most of the men were forced to go beneath deck. Windows blacked out. We're not allowed to see this. He actually touched it. And he said it was seamless. He took, I think it was a rock or something, and tried to scratch it. You couldn't do anything at all to affect the surface of this object. Next. And now I just want to share this. So we have this man's testimony. We're going to run out of time for me to share all of it. But I know Shawn Ryan, thank you, is here. This is not far from your home in Nashville. There's a black site, 160, in Tennessee, outside of Nashville, in a remote area, that is using ARVs and criminal psychological warfare operations. Oh, here it is. And if you look at this, what he's describing are these ARVs, although these were more the triangular ones, whereas you'll hear from Mr. Herrera, his was more circular, that were involved in running drugs and doing all kinds of atrocities. Now we know where this site is. We have it on a map. We have his testimony. He can be, deposed in a subpoena. He did not want to come. He almost was about to come. He just got cold feet. Often happens. Again, I've seen this so many times, and I have complete sympathy. And this is, I'm telling you, the guys that are here are absolutely courageous. So we also have the locations of these sites. Now, he was someone who had been, if you understand the MK Ultra program, there was an advanced version of it, and as a young child, he was handed off into that project, and he knows where the airstrips are. He's given us all this information. So that's also in the archive that has just gone to the White House, to the Pentagon, to the Senate, and to the House. Take this, multiply it times hundreds of people like that. Those are the people we've debriefed. Those are the people we have their name and information on. I have no subpoena power. I'm a civilian. I'm a private person until we stand up a civilian RICO. And here's where I'm going to bridge for a minute. Derek Garcia and some other attorneys, we now have, I think, over 50 legal professionals and attorneys that are on the Disclosure Project Legal Defense Fund. And we need to stand up major funding for that, because even though all these attorneys are pro bono, the out-of-pocket on it is going to be very, very high. I can't imagine we would need less than $1 million or so. But so far, we make things happen whether we have anything or not, frankly, due to guys like you who support the project and donate and contribute. But I think that what you need to take away from this is that these cases I've shared are a quick tour through this. But in reality, it's the teeniest tip of the iceberg of what we have. And this is name, email, cell numbers, DD-214s, site locations, operational details, etc. So the media needs to understand this is what we have. Some of those folks are here coming forward. But the Congress, the Department of Justice, and the Pentagon investigations need to then start doing their job on behalf of the American people and for humanity. I wanted to set the stage with that first hour and a half to introduce 3 of our 5 heroic folks that are here on stage. If we can have these gentlemen come forward, and then there are others being prepared to come forward, like the whistleblower earlier this week, but we really need the people who are on the inside coming forward, like the gentleman, the snapshot of those 3 or 4 witnesses that couldn't be here yet, because there is credibility in numbers, there's strength in numbers, but there's also safety in numbers. So, and I think we need to turn this into where there's a torrent instead of a trickle of men of courage, because, the saying, if good men do nothing, evil will prevail. So this is a time for people to come forward and show the kind of uncommon courage which obviously these gentlemen possess. The first person I want to introduce is Stephen Digna Jr. He's another Stephen, spelled the same way as mine. He's an Army, a former Army, a veteran, who was at Fort Irwin, California, and had a singularly important series of events happen. He obviously has some disabilities. I don't know if you want to speak from there.
I actually would prefer it there just because.
Yep. Is there a portable mic for him, folks? Okay. So I just wanted to let you know that Mr. Digna has a very long story. His account is really, I would say, 2 or 3 hours, really, to unpack it all. And so he's going to share with you the highlights. I can tell you, all 5 of these gentlemen have been through the skiff at the Pentagon, an Arrow that we've arranged. They had more time there than here with this schedule. But I do want to then introduce Stephen Digna. Thank you.
All right. Without further ado, my name is Stephen Michael Digna Jr. I'm a former sergeant in the United States Army. I've been in active duty service in 1999 and served until 2000. I was assigned to the United States Army, Fort Irwin, California Training Center located in the Mojave Desert, inside Death Valley near Barstow, California in April of 2000. The base code is W4J 9er Alpha Alpha. Inside I was assigned to Alpha Company Operations Group, Live Fire Combat Engineer Division as a computer support systems team manager, as a team lead. The following testimony is true and as accurate as can be at this time to the best of my ability, and I'm prepared to swear to this testimony under oath and before the Senate and Congress. The following testimony is as true and accurate as it can be at this time and to the best of my ability. I acted as the hub between the operations group intelligence planners, the ground team, Air Force, and the Star Wars program. In July of 2001, while observing the live fire exercise or practice, I saw at eye level from an observation deck at approximately 3 stories high from the desert floor, a craft in the distance, approximately 200 feet off the ground, measuring approximately 172 foot across at the center of the bunker observation deck. The image, it was strongly resembling a hovering B-2 Spirit. I mean hovering, it was stationary. Upon first glance, my eyes were adjusting to the darkness, but I could see 7 lights in a V-shaped formation. After that, I closed my eyes for approximately 30 seconds. I allowed them to adjust to the light conditions. We were running red lights throughout the bunker due to the current live fire exercise, which was interrupted by a call from the range. There's a ceasefire. They said, "We've got lights above the range. When the range is hot, that's a no-go." This was unscheduled. Once my eyes adjusted, I could make out the general shape of the craft. There were 2 men from Raytheon present. I quietly pulled my MVGs, my night vision goggles, out from my pocket and looked at the craft. It appeared to be generating 7 lights along its wings underbelly. As I shifted to my stance, another smaller craft oriented on the right side and at the same height as the first craft, approximately 75 to 100 yards to its right. The second craft was jet black, V-shaped, pointed towards the first craft. This craft had equally joined spaced rectangular sections forming the hull. The craft had a gimbal or rack system that deployed from the bottom of the craft. The craft was approximately 5 to 6 of these gimbal systems emitting light were pointed directly at the first craft. The second craft's size was very hard to distinguish due to the angle and orientation. However, I approximated that one wing seemed to be the length of the F-16. It had no lights other than the gimbal lights, and it was jet black. The other B-2 looking craft seemed to be matted black or gray. One of the 2 men from the Raytheon department on the observation deck with me noticed I had the night vision goggles on. He had looked at me with a disapproval, probably a little anger that I had these on. Those two gentlemen calmly went inside. I took another quick look with the night vision goggles. The mood had shifted. I was either in trouble or I got them in trouble, but that weight comes with the position. So I just headed back into the bunker. The reason this event was not reported up the chain of command is due to the fact that this was not unidentified. This was ours, and was in fact a part of my recruitment process into the programs. As to any of these personnel coming out, it is to my belief that they will need to see one of their own lead the way. This was the fastest promotion in 25 years on post to get it to E5. I was in E3 when E2 when I showed up. Congressional waiver, presidential waiver to E5, rapid. They needed me to run that bunker. Sorry, I'm seeing the faces of these men right now, and all the men on the battlefield, all of my observer controllers, and everyone that called into the Voice of the Desert in 2000, 2001. This is for you, and all of the men overseas, all of the people on the planet, everyone here in this room, and for the love of God and all that is good, I hope that this can heal the planet. Approximately 5 to 7 days, the following incident took place on Fort Irwin Road on a weekend pass with my wife, following this craft I saw in the bunker, the same rotation. My wife and I went to a drive-in movie. We used to do this regularly. We watched 2 movies. We left early. I was burnt out, so we took off down Fort Irwin Road, coming back to the base. We got through a long stretch, which seemed like one straight line, and we approached this canyon. It has some really steep slopes and really heavy curves. It's about the only thing I enjoyed about that road. The drop in elevation opens up with a dry lake bed on the right-hand side and the desert floor to the left with a mountain ridge to the distance. As we passed the dry lake bed, on the right, my driver's side mirror reflected a powerful white light into my eyes. I saw a bright white light pop up out of the canyon I just came out of. Looked over my left shoulder, and that light mimicked my track, exact speed. All I could see was bright lights, bright white through all of my windows. And at the same time, my engine powered down. I saw that light behind me. It was 2 miles back. This was milliseconds later. My engine died. The car's front end bounced a few times due to terrain in the desert. We veered off the road a little bit. When I corrected the vehicle back to the road with the power off, I jumped out of the vehicle, jumped towards the front end of my car, believing there was someone pointing a floodlight at us. They were going to get a piece of my mind. I stepped through a thick white field of plasma that encompassed a spheroid craft. It appeared to be a spheroid at first. It was white, big, pink, and blue plasma flowing all around in a spheroid shape. As I turned to go, I stepped through that thick wall of plasma, and as I turned to go inspect the craft, my wife opened the door. She ran towards the front of the car, but if you saw the look on her face, she screamed, "Steve, no." And in that moment in time, a 6-inch thick field of plasma emanated from this craft and enveloped her whole body. She was stuck in a running position. I instantly knew, I don't know how, that she was in a term called stasis lock. This means your quantum molecules can no longer move. However, you are in homeostasis. Your biological system still operates. I heard a voice in my head, very clearly. It was a female's voice, very calmly. It stated, "She is in stasis lock." Relieved that she was safe, I started approaching the craft for further inspection. The craft and the nose of my vehicle were at a 90-degree intersect. It was at the front of the craft. If you're looking from a bird's eye view, looking down, it would be an L-shaped formation, nose to nose. As I approached the craft, I saw a spheroid layer of plasma surrounding it. The plasma field was emitting approximately 12 inches around the craft. The craft seemed to be approximately 23 feet long. I stepped forward. I extended my left hand slightly. I reached out, and as I did, the craft responded by jerking back and then to the side, as if it were a cat or a boxer trying to dodge a straight punch. It jerked back and to the side. I stepped back also in courtesy, and also I was warned. As I took a deep breath, I approached again like I would a large animal that could take my life. As I did, a small opening retracted in this field, exactly enough space for my hand to fit in. I touched the side of a black craft that was jet black. It looked like black onyx, polished, as smooth as glass. As I set my hand down on the craft, Dr. Greer, I'm just gonna have to show you because it's very hard to describe. Like anyone encountering a new aircraft or a build, I walked up to this craft as I put my hand down and then took another step forward closer to the craft. I realized that this is ambient temperature. There was no heat. Felt like the ambient desert air. This threw me off. Shouldn't be the case. As I set my hand, I then glided it up the side of the craft, and I planed my head with it like I'm planing a piece of wood. And as I did so, the craft emitted a purring sound. Exactly at that time, a pattern of tiger stripes went up the starboard side of the craft that I was on, emitted all the way up the craft, and it emitted tiger stripe pattern as if it was emitting a display and it was communicating to me. The pattern underneath that was like this tie. I chose the tie specifically. Michael, I tried to describe this to you. I'll show you later. Michael worked on me to work on some schematics to draw this up, and him and his team did an excellent job, and I would love for them to be seen when the time is due. As I did this, and this pattern replicated all the way up through the craft, and its outer layer of skin, which I would learn soon at this moment, that this was just a millimeter, or just a few centimeters of skin, and an outer layer to something that, well, it blew my mind and inspired me for the rest of my life to study science, to figure out what I was observing. Pixels where I had placed my hand and then drew them back, the texture of this craft changed. It then felt like shark skin if you drew your hand backwards, or a cat's tongue. Very subtle. As I drew my hand back, all of a sudden, every pixel of the space where my hand had drawn backwards on jumped into the air, approximately a foot and a half off the craft. Every pixel. These look like metal shavings of graphene or magnetite. As they did this is when this purr sound had occurred, and it wasn't just a small purr. I felt the bass as though the animal was right next to me. At that moment, I recognized if this isn't operated by a human, then it has the intellect of a predator feline cat. And this is only speculation, and I'll cut it there. That's only my speculation. However, that's my observation, and I was a former computer systems operator and analyst. So system analyzation is what I do. And as I drew my hand backwards, and where the space lifted up, underneath my hand and where these pixels lifted up, systemically, as I drew my hand down, underneath this very thin skin, I saw a lattice work, honeycomb shaped, graphene in color, gray. And beneath that is something that I will never, ever forget for the rest of my life, as if I could forget any of this. There were plasma conduits. And I'm not talking wires, I'm not talking nuts, I'm not talking bolts, I'm not talking a serial bus system. I'm talking plasma conduit bands that looked like a neural network. They were the same pink and blue, vibrant colors and emitting so many colors that I cannot define within the color spectrum. And within this, in these bands, I could see what looked like synapses firing, because in between these bands that streamed through this craft, underneath the skin, white lines that looked like, there's no other way to explain it, but thunderbolts jumping from line to line, as if I was seeing inside the photons of a brain's network. As I drew my hand backwards towards me, pulling it towards me, each pixel just filled in as if you were looking in a mirror, and you blew on it and you wiped the fog away, and then the fog filled back in. I peered closer into this as I drew my hand closer. I was trying to chase my hand and get to be able to see directly into this craft. I needed to observe what was propagating this field inside and the field outside. I was looking for some kind of a operations device, something. I saw none of this. As I drew my hand at that point, all the way down, and it was almost in front of my face, my other hand was here, and my elbow and my whole body weight was dropped onto this craft. This craft was solid. I could not push it down. Again, it was in a locked position, like quantum locking. Could not move it. This was not like the Star Wars flicks. This was way beyond that. When he jumped out of that speeder on Tatooine, that thing jerked and jiggled. That's not what it's really like. Not at all.
Did you want this?
No, sir. Okay. Not at this moment. Thank you, sir. As I put my hand and drew my other closer, I was trying to peer through. And as I did so, I pressed with my hand and my forearm. And I saw through a small window right here, through my elbow, which was in line with the side of my car and my phase-locked wife, which I'll bring up later. There was a long line in the sky. It wasn't high up above us, approximately 100 to 75 feet. That's an estimate. It's very hard to judge distances at night, especially when you see a heat foil, as though you would observe when you're driving down a hot summer day and you see a heat foil on the road or on your car out in the Mojave Desert. You can see it floating above. I saw a ripple through the sky in a perfect line, which curved long in the distance like a horizon would. And after that shimmer and that heat foil, what appeared to be a heat foil, the stars above shimmered in a perfectly straight line. Suddenly, they fixed back to their correct position, and I recognized this is a cloaked, massive ship above the desert and above my wife and I, and our vehicle and this craft. It's very hard because I can see this all in my mind like it's a replay. I'm seeing it right now, and it's extremely traumatizing. That's why we're here. There's soldiers out there believing that we don't have access to this, and we do. As the stars corrected, I tried to gauge the size and immensity of this craft, which I could see no edges of. Once that line shimmered, that was it. I could see the sky and the stars above. This craft could be above you at any moment in time, and if stationary, without observing that motion, you would have no clue. This is detrimental to the safety of the United States government, the United States people, the world, and I'm proud to be here with Dr. Greer.
But this was, you're saying this was a Raytheon.
Yes, this is.
I want to be clear, this is not interstellar.
That first craft that I saw on the range, I looked at the guys in the bunker when that ceasefire came in. That came from a soldier on the ground. They're called observer controllers. My job at that bunker was to keep them alive. I was called the voice of the desert because my base station shut down everything in that desert in case they were in danger. And those observer controllers, they had that power too. The man that was out there that did this is an experienced combatant who was there to train the force. These men train all of the United States military, armored cavalry regiments, ground soldiers, airborne soldiers, every soldier that needs desert warfare training. And as we know, over the last 20 years, their lives have been in danger, their lives have been sacrificed to an unwitting end. And I'm here, hopefully, we can end that today, or at least start the kickoff of it. So these Raytheon men were well aware of this craft. They asked me, do you want to go see it? They knew what this bird was. When they were on that observation deck, they were cool as a cucumber, just like we were in that bunker when we were doing our jobs. Very calm, very collected, extremely professional, and relaxed. When that range shuts down, we're locked in that bunker for hours, days. So when the range clears and we can go outside, we can light up a cigarette, we take a deep breath and we get some oxygen. So when I walked out there and I seen that craft, the only thing I could think of immediately was, this is identical to the Phoenix Lights in 1988 in Phoenix, Arizona. Identical. There was no deviation. The only issue is the civilian populace did not have night vision goggles to extrapolate the data from the black. That's it. They didn't have the tools to see. I did, and this craft that was above the desert, and I'm going to jump back to that. Thank you for that. I needed that.
You wanted this?
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, sure. My pleasure.
As I observed the sky, all of a sudden, as I panned my head this way, and so you know, this is only a very brief encounter. This whole event, as far as I can recollect, is only about 8 minutes long. However, with the trauma of this, it's hard to remember a time when real important things happen, you know? So I observed something in the sky, right along with line as I was painting to my right. Just past the road, past some telephone phone poles, and just above two rock formations, which I have zeroed in with Google Maps, and I'll get that information. I've already briefed that information as Dr. Greer had announced to the proper authorities to make sure that this gets handled. I observed a giant bay door. It was bright white, looked like a giant floating window in the sky, but immense. In that window, I saw to the very right corner a female silhouette. I could tell it was a female silhouette due to the hair flowing in the wind. Or at least, I could see the silhouette of the hair right here. I don't think it was flowing in any wind. At that precise moment, I heard that very same calm female voice say, "You were not supposed to see that." Very clearly that. You were not supposed to see that. And at that time, I felt an extremely powerful thud, and I heard it in my whole body cavity. And that thud increased. Thud, 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 thud. And then it increased in intensity and speed. Thud, 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 thud. And it rapidly increased. And the only thing I can use to explain it is, if you've ever seen the movie Interstellar, when the main actor jumped through that black hole, it was identical. Someone else out there has knowledge of these programs. I told those men in that bunker, and what got me kicked up the conversation for this is that I wanted to be the first man to jump through a black hole. And I didn't want to do it in a ship. I wanted to do it in a suit. The suit was the ship. And they said, "Why the heck would you want to do that?" And it says, "To click the radio and tell you what's on the other side." Because I know we're not alone out here. And after that, I got a really intense speech. I'm not going to reiterate that speech right now. So you know, to those men in that bunker, I mean no disrespect. I know you want this out too. And if they chop my head off for it, so be it. The truth needs to be stated. So as this happened, I began to see a velvet rings, and I mean violet velvet, and they started coming down in front of my face rapidly. I could tell they were encompassing myself and this whole scenario, everything around me in the general area, my vehicle, where my wife was, and then myself. And as this intensity built up, I began myself start to lift off the ground like this. And I recognized that my feet and my body were tipping like this. And as I noticed this, I recognized I could no longer move my hands. I couldn't fight this. I think that my body was locked like my wife's was. And as I felt the lifting, I saw my car lifting with me. And my head tipped back because I wanted to see what was happening above me. And as I saw above me with my peripherals, and as I was tilting back, I saw that diamond-shaped craft that I had touched. And I could see the underbelly of the craft. The underbelly of this craft was not like the top. It was not smooth. It was not elegant. However, it was extremely interesting from an analytical point of view for a computer system operator analyst. It displayed 3 white areas that would emit white light. Are these popping up?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, guys. I didn't know you could see that. So
You can look over to the left, you'll see it.
yes, sir. So you'll see the exact breakdown, and to the best of my knowledge that I could break down. And I tell you, it was PTSD straight through this. This has had me locked down in my home for years until Dr. Greer. I followed him for years. I've tracked a lot of these guys doing this. This man speaks truth, and I can swear to that. This gentleman over here in his art division team, Michael Schratt, and all of this team and these men and women sitting in front of me, they helped me get here. They've watched me cry. They've watched me tremor and sweat. Now, if you can look at this craft on my either side, you're going to observe those 3 white lights came from the circles, and they're surrounded by something I described as the catwalk. Now, that's the very bottom of this craft, okay? So that catwalk then dropped into the section you see in between that's encompassed, and you'll see this array. Now, this looked molded. This looked like the bird of prey that's described by Michael Strack and all of his. It looks like it was 3D printed, or pressed. I live in a place where they build cars and stamp stuff, and this stuff was smooth. It was pretty. There were no hard lines there. It all tapered into each other, excluding these strange things you'll see at the front. It looks like some strange, weird language, something like that. But it's not. I believe those are for directional control. But inside that, you'll then see some space. That looked like that dropped into the craft. It looked like an electrical socket. And later on, you'll find out why I'm almost 100% that's true. So as I observed all of this, I instantaneously queued back in because everything had apologized. Thank you, sir. Everything had queued out. All of a sudden, I queue back in, and I'm on my back, which is pretty shocking. All I could see above me queuing in was the blur of white, bright white. And I realized I'm staring into some bright white lights. They're emanating from the ceiling of a hangar bay. I start trying to move my eyes to the left. I'm trying to observe and orient myself with where the heck I am and kind of figure out how I got from the desert floor to this space. And at that time, I saw my wife. She was on a table just beside me. The table was a matted pewter gray, not shiny. It wasn't meant to be shiny, but it was exactly her size. Of the length of her body. She was a little shorter than me. So I recognized that she couldn't move still. Her eyes were still fixed and locked. Her face was still saying no. Her mouth was stuck saying no. For a husband, that's locked in my mind for the rest of my life. She's been traumatized. She can't be here because I have to lead the way. That was my charge. This happened off duty. Off base, things that happened to me on the range, that's fine. That's just fine. If this would have just happened to me, that's fine. This is fine. I swore an oath and I signed up to defend the country. She did. She was out. She prior service. She got out. She didn't sign up for this, so I had to iterate, put that in. As I observed this horrific scene, I then panned my my vision over, and I saw in front of me my vehicle. It was across the hangar bay. The right side of my vehicle towards the front passenger tire was lifted. There were men and women. Well, I can't say. I didn't see faces. I'm saying men and women because I can't be sure. Men or women. And I'm saying men or women. We're not alien. Saw no aliens on this craft. These were men and women or women. They were working on my vehicle. They had on full white suits, masks, full glass. Their heads were covered. Behind that was a blue rack. It looked like some kind of a rack, like a car rack to lift a vehicle up. However, it looked really weak to do that. It may have had another purpose. At that time, I continued on, and I recognized there's a woman standing next to me, right near my middle half of torso. She was taking samples. She had a device in her hand. There were 2 rings, one on each side. And you can stick your fingers in. And then after that, there was a ring in a circle connected in the center. Don't know what it's for. That's what I observed. The female had red hair, strongly resembled Dana Scully, the character from the X-Files. I know you're laughing. That's not a joke. I'm very good with descriptive stuff. Her nose, the ridge of her nose, it was straight, soft curve. Her jawline was separate from the actor. However, the hair, the tone of the hair, the color of the hair, and the texture of the hair, and the texture and tone of her skin were identical. Her eyes were a vibrant, bright blue. She began to notice that I was aware and conscious, cognitive. At that point in time, I tried to move. Hadn't before. Never even thought of it. I was just shocked that I was in this new place. However, I was calm. I was angry, but I was calm. And I tried moving, and I couldn't. My body, I could feel an electrical energy flowing through my body. It was an electrostatic field. And from at that point in time, I started thinking, let me up. I was expecting to be let up. I thought I was in some form of quarantine, my wife and I. I thought we were going to get let up and then introduced to this new paradigm that we had just walked into. That wasn't the factor. This doctor became very, 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 very uncomfortable. I could sense very, very much so that she was trying to avoid eye contact with me. She couldn't do so due to her peripheral vision and the task that of which she had at hand. And at that point in time, I continued looking over. And as I saw behind her, I could see out that bay window. I could see the stars. I could see the lights from the base on the right, lighting up the desert floor, but the rest of the desert floor was jet black. There was no light emitting, but I could see 2 rock formations, and then off in the distance, a very, very familiar sight for me, familiar to anyone that has ever driven down Fort Irwin Road. A rock formation that helped me identify the exact location of this upon later retrospect. And we weren't in space. I'm really bummed out about that. However, hopefully everyone will have a chance after this. I then saw, as I panned over, and this is something I recollected after going through the process of working through this with Michael Schratt. Michael Schratt went through some PTSD of me trying to recollect this craft to the best of my ability to the most acute detail. And as I panned right to look, I saw that craft docked on a very small docking station that would fit that. The distance.
You can go back to the graphic
above. I had referred to earlier. There's that rectangular space. That dock was that shape, that depth, and this craft was docked into it. There was a large, thick cable running from the back of this. It came straight back. It broke a 90 and went behind us. At that moment in time, my wife and I were erect, upright, back in our vehicle on Fort Irwin Road. Our faces were deadlocked. Our eyes were locked, facing each other. We were newlyweds. We were deeply in love. So at that moment in time, I began to recognize I'm looking at my wife. and then everything animated. All of a sudden she saw me, we looked at each other, kind of not understanding what's happening. Then we both looked forward. As we look forward, I instantaneously, as I always do out in the desert, you do a time check before you leave anywhere for safety. And the time was 9:23. When I left the movies, it was exactly time turned 13. I checked at the gate. Anyone out here that's ever ran a mission? You know what I mean. You check in before you leave, and you check in when you arrive. That's so we know you're safe. As we reanimated, we were already moving. The cruise control was back on. And we were approaching a main bend. That main bend is headed towards painted rocks. These rocks are painted with all of the units that have came through. And it's a very, very visceral sight when you see it, because you recognize how many men and women have been out there and how long that base has been there. And the long, long record of honor, duty, respect, loyalty, selfless service. All of the 7 Army values were stacked as a monument in representation of what we do out there. And that's train the force and keep people alive to defend the country. So we reanimated. We just cruised up to the gate. We both knew something was off. We just couldn't put our fingers on it. Then we approached the gate. We got back home. We had been out on a 3-week-long rotation and still hadn't seen my dogs. I ran my dog every morning. He was gone when I came back from my assignment in Belgium. He got hit by a truck. So talking about him is very hard because he was my true battle buddy. On the teams, I ran a position solo. My 2 predecessors were no longer able to perform the duties due to the fact that they couldn't go down range and wear Kevlar. They became pregnant. I gladly and proudly stood up into that position and held a weight that was way above my neck. And I do it again to this day.
We might need to,
Yes,
so the other men
I'm
have
be
time.
Jumping in real quick.
Okay.
And then that event ended. 9/11 happened. I went to Belgium. I met some people. I recognized I was possibly being screened. That's being investigated right now by the people Dr. Greer working with. And without further ado, I'd like to hand the mic over. That's all I have to say, and all I have to say after that is Godspeed to all the men and women who stand up behind me. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. The one thing I want to point out here, because it's difficult, it's a complex story. It takes several hours to unpack. But no, you did a great job. Is that all of this that happened were based on the technologies that are at Raytheon, Lockheed Skunk Works, and other corporations. And you can see how those could be used to simulate an alien event, alien abductions, and stagecraft. It's called stagecraft. I've been warning of this for 30 years. Few people have taken what I've said seriously. He was a direct witness, witness to it. So one of the problems is with these technologies that have, we have now 70, 80 years of reverse engineering and studying extraterrestrial advanced technologies. They've been deployed in a number of ways, not just propulsion systems and energy systems, but these sort of very advanced, even conscious AI almost level of technology. Now, the problem with that's less believable than the alien narrative. But people forget that if you have trillions of dollars, Catherine Austin Fitts is saying somewhere around $22 trillion that are missing in our various governments' economies that have gone into these kind of projects. So people, the Congress, the media have to understand, as far out in space age as this sounds like a science fiction movie, it's all true. And we have multiple people who have worked in these areas of technology at the Skunk Works, at Northrop, at Raytheon. And at some point, that entire constellation of technologies need to be disclosed, not only to the president and Congress and the rank and the people in the Pentagon that you think would know, like this Defense Intelligence Agency director I briefed, but eventually the American people, because otherwise the risk of that group staging false events, and this is the big risk. We're all sitting ducks because we just don't know. This is why his account and all these gentlemen's accounts are so important. The extraterrestrial end of this is almost secondary to what human developed technologies have, how they've been used and how they've been used criminally, and how they have to begin to get quickly under proper supervision and control. So next we'll have Mr. Long, if you don't mind coming. You can sit there or you can come up, it's up to you. You'll say there? Okay, good. So let's turn his mic on, and Mr. Long is Army. He was at Fort Bragg in North Carolina, not that many years ago, where quite an extraordinary event happened. Again, this particular event was in a underground place that, and he will tell you what happened there. It's a point, it's a dot, let's call it, in this matrix of this picture we're trying to provide for the public, but also for the Congress and the Pentagon. So please.
Thank you. Before I get started, I just wanted to thank Dr. Greer and Emily for, first of all, convincing me to actually get to this point. It took about 6 months to get me just to be able to speak about it out loud and to take a phone call. For various reasons we'll get into, but you know, his entire team, I wish I could name them all, but Raven, Hiram, Mike, all you guys, Lieutenant Colonel, it's a pleasure to see you, sir. Before I get any further, in 1987, we spoke about this last night, I went down and I saw the SR-71 when I was a little tiny kid, and there was a demonstration being given, and I wanted to find the pilot, and they told me, oh, he'd come around. And I asked for an autograph, never got it. I just wanted to put it out there, sir. But I appreciate it, Mark. Thank you so much. But get into my story. In March of 1997, that's whenever I joined the service. And I served up until 2013. I was injured in a combat jump, which ended my career. And I'll wrap up my story with that point as to why it transitions in. But before I joined the military, my father was a government contractor. That's the reason everyone calls me DC. His name was Dwight Long Sr. And I felt it was disrespectful for anybody to call me my father's name because I never lived up to it. But he was a government contractor on the Eastern Seaboard. He worked closely with the Army Corps of Engineers, taking bids, completing contracts, and in my spare time, I would go with him. So if I was CONUS, I would help my father. When I was stationed at Bragg, I would help him. At this time, I was stationed in Fort Benning, Georgia, at the 75th STB, whenever he called me and said that he needed some assistance on some of the projects in Bragg that he was working on. I met him at the 18th Airborne Headquarters, G5. We were told that there was going to be an escort excuse me, that was coming from JFK Warfare Center to escort us down to a place that he referred to that I later found out was called Range 19. Whenever they picked us up, it was in a nondescript van, no windows, no partition to the front. So we were joking back and forth. What did you say? We're going to go to Leavenworth now. And so we finally get there. Drove about 15 minutes and get down to a point that, as I said, that they referred to as Range 19. As soon as they opened the door, it looked like an absolute dump. I mean, literal dump. There was trash everywhere. A little door with a 45-degree angle concrete cut. We went into this door, and that's whenever we met our second escort, a man that I won't name, I have in private, but he was one of the operators, Delta Force operator that I later learned. That's what he did. I knew the guy for 15 years. We would hunt, race together. Never knew that he was even in service. We meet a secondary escort. They take us to this freight elevator. About 20 meters in, they open the elevator, nondescript, about 10 or 15 buttons on the side, had no writing on it. He punches a button, and he said, whenever we exit this door, keep your eyes on the heels of the man in front of you. Don't open your mouth. No left, right. Just keep following your escorts out. Roger, no problem. Door opens. We see a Connex. Just to our right is a personnel Connex. It was about 4 in a stack. We go to move forward, and it was, pardon my language, but it was a perfect old shit moment. What was in there wasn't supposed to be there. They kept trying to push us out. But as soon as I walked in, just to my right, I saw what I described as a monolithic slab, about 20 feet long, 7 feet tall. I couldn't tell the width. But I noticed that there was nothing underneath this slab. I could see on the very top of it. Yeah, there we go. Michael Schratt, thank you so much. It's like you pulled it out of my mind. Notice the thing on top. It reminded me of a GMTK toolbox we used to use back in the day, painted black, sitting on top. And the closer I got, I noticed, and it's worth noting at this point, whenever we go into this room, the loudest thing in there was the silence. The only thing we heard was our own footfalls of the guys in front of us. That illustration down to that guy on the ground, that's me, and that's the escort standing behind me. So naturally, I abandoned all my military principles, and my Southern inclination took over, and I just had to see what was going on. The closer I got to the center, I could feel this massive vibration, but I couldn't hear anything. And the closer we got to the center, I noticed that it felt like it was pulling me and pushing me at the same time. So I decided I need to tie my shoe. So I knelt down, and I'm taking a peek, and I look over, and the escort behind me's got his knee in my back. It's just a little closer to where we are there, but I could notice that there was nothing holding this sumbitch up. I apologize. There was nothing holding this thing up from the bottom. It was about 12 or 16 inches off the ground. And at that point, I could see what looked to be a boulder behind it. That was sitting on the ground. The one just to the right there, I noticed that there was a man, had his hands on it. I couldn't see his face. He had his back to me, and he was pushing this thing left and right. He was spinning it around, and that was about 10 or 12 inches off the ground. And at that point, the escort that was behind me said, "Let's go." He used some more colorful language than that.
There we go.
Yeah. Oh, my God. Man, Michael, you are amazing. Absolutely. That's incredible. As you see here, the only lights that were illuminating the area that we were in that appeared to be about twice the size of this room in here, it was only over our heads from the walkway that we were being escorted down. And everything in the back was dark, but the largest monolithic slab, it was disturbing to me because I could feel inside everything it's like I told the guys here, it was like standing in front of a speaker at a concert. You could just feel the bass just emanating through your body, but I couldn't hear anything. And it didn't scare me at the moment, but it knew that this was something that I shouldn't be looking at. I didn't need to be a part of this. At that point, the escort got me up, we got out, and our appointed place of duty in there as to why we were there to begin with, as I said, my father was a government contractor. There was a live fire range just below the area where we were, and our job was to build a mock city so they could flow through, do their training, 3-foot thick walls with rubber so they could have live fire exercises down. 30 minutes goes by, that's being generous. We come back upstairs, there's absolutely nothing there. Everything in the hangar that we just walked by previously was absolutely empty. They hurried us out, got us back in the van. We get back to 18th Airborne Headquarters. The notebook that my father was using to write all the measurements, what we were going to have to do to submit the bid to the Army Corps of Engineers, that was confiscated. They eventually gave us our phone back. But and I apologize for jumping all over the place. I'm used to having a guitar in my hand in front of this many people singing with me, so this is a little nerve-wracking. But within 48 hours, I left. I didn't think much of it. I get a call from one of the workers that worked for my father. Like I said, I grew up with these people. I knew him intimately. He said, hey man, what's going on? We're trying to get to work and everything's closed off. Can't get my father on the phone. In less than 24 hours, whenever we got back, his entire business, the entire life that we built from the time that I was a kid till I became a man, ran off and joined the military, everything was liquidated, everything was seized. We couldn't even get in under our own property. Lightning struck, our house burned down. Everything that I accumulated in my life up to that point burned with it. I finally found my father later that day, and I said, hey man, do you think this has something to do with Range 19 and what we saw? And I can't illustrate just how much of a bond that me and my father had. I was his junior, he was my senior, he was my battle buddy before I knew what that term meant. You know, these gentlemen have seen the videos that showed from news outlets doing stories on us when we used to race. It was he and I, back and forth. Please excuse my language. I'm just telling you directly. My father looked me in the eye and said, don't you ever mention that to me again. He left. That was the last time I saw my father. Carrying on before we get back to that. I was down in Fort Benning, Georgia. We were doing a combat center jump. The only team that I jumped with are the 12 guys I spent my entire life professionally with. When the first man in the stick, we're in the air, they give us the signal, 30 seconds. Jump master's standing there, he's got his arm ready to hit me out. Gentleman comes from the front of the aircraft, stands just by my right shoulder. I'm looking out of the aircraft. This gentleman, I lock eyes with him. I know exactly who he is. He was one of the escorts that took us down. As I was waiting for the light goes green, something hits me in the face. It's a static line. I was ripped out of the aircraft. I broke my neck on the way out. I was trying so hard to stop the oscillation. I thought I had a cigarette roll. So I was trying to pull my risers apart, but my arms wouldn't work. On the way out of the bird, my combat gear, my lowering line, my 1950s weapons case was already down. I remember looking down, seeing daylight, and seeing my combat pack, my 1950s weapons case, swinging in the air. And next thing I know, I impact the ground. When I woke up, sometime later, I was told, you're not fit to be airborne. You're not fit to be a soldier. They started the MEB process to get me out of the military. I can handle that. I know as crazy as that sounds, I can absolutely understand that things happen. Operational accidents are just part of the works. Everybody's prepared for it. If you take the oath, you know what's coming. CONUS or OCONUS. For the next time that I was aware of my father was in 2010. I received a phone call that you need to get up to Fayetteville. Daddy's in the hospital. So I go see my father. I walked by his room. I didn't recognize him. The 6'3", 240-pound man disappeared. There was a 98-pound skeleton with eyes that looked like my father's, but that I just didn't recognize. He was trying to speak. He couldn't. I was told that someone who occasionally drank, someone who never smoked, had terminal cancer in their lungs and their liver. I lost more than my career. I lost my father. Like I said, I'm fine with losing my career. That's just part of the job. But finding out that me and my dad having more in common than just our looks, our name, when both of us, I found out that he was homeless the same amount of time that I was, because I just had to get away from it. I changed how I looked. I destroyed any electronics I had, social media. You know, a year and a half ago, you absolutely wouldn't recognize me. I was 135 pounds. I was an alcoholic. I was addicted to pain medication. My hair was down my back. My beard was down to my chest. My wife spent 3 years tracking me down like a damn detective